You are listening to the Racer to Racer podcast presented by Race 92. Race 92 is a vintage-inspired racing apparel brand specializing in celebrating vintage race culture and adapting to motorsports today. Check out race92.com for all your racing merchandise needs. I'm your co-host, Aaron Mack. The other co-host, you may have seen walking out of a great clips with a big old smile on his face. You've probably seen him at a dirt track. He is a one and only Scott Alley.
What's up, Aaron?
Not much. Just living the dream. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Did you have a good weekend?
I did. I forgot what I even did, but I had a good weekend. It's only Monday, and I've already forgot. It was Father's
What?
Day. It was Father's Day.
Right. Did you get any unexpected knocks on the door or anything?
Nope, I did not. I did not get the knocks that Scott Bowie probably gets on Father's Day.
No, I can. I think I'm pretty safe by now. At my age, I haven't gotten that yet, so I think I've slid in under the wire. I'm pretty safe.
That's what you got to
From the
do.
video you sent me, you were trying to run down baby deer.
I know today I was mountain biking tonight, and I almost ran into a deer. The first time I've actually had a GoPro on me, and the first time I've ever got that close to a deer.
Yep.
Oh dear.
It didn't stick around.
Well, no, and
you
you know what's funny is I went down, so it's just right at the start of the trail, and it was probably like 20 yards. So then I turned around. I'm like, I'm gonna do this again because I like messed up my momentum. So I did it again, and the deer was there again. It came right back up.
Those deer.
And at that point, I just gave up. I'm like, if I go back up, it's going to do the same thing.
Right. It's like a game.
It is.
You didn't see it. You didn't see its mother anywhere.
No, we saw it actually because I rode to the same place with my dad Sunday, and we saw, which I'm guessing was the mother in the same area. I mean, this was a little baby deer.
Good.
I mean, this thing. I don't know when deer have their babies or whatever, but
yeah, it was small.
It was really small. Yeah. Well, so yeah, the episode today, which I was super excited about when we did it. The funny thing is, so it's Chris Kneifel. The funny thing is, like, he was someone that I wanted to interview early on. Like, I was trying to find ways to like reach out to him, and he actually followed us on Instagram. And I was super surprised when that happened. So I reached out to him, and he was very generous with his time. We had some IT issues in the beginning there. We were trying to help him get connected, and he was very generous with his time with that. We finally got him connected, and yeah, it was a great talk. Absolutely great. Great guy. And he had some really, really good stories.
Yeah, he did, and he's had a lot of roles in motorsports. Just besides driving, and it was interesting to hear him talk a little bit all that. And man, yeah, it was a great talk. I had a good time talking to him. Hopefully, we'll talk to him again soon.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, we will.
I mean, he's just a fun guy.
Yeah, he was someone who had a ton of talent. Drove in a couple Indy 500s. I remember at the beginning of the interview, you gave him stats of like his top like 10 finishes or whatever, and it was very impressive. And the big thing that really got him out of IndyCar racing was his height. I mean, I think he's officially the tallest IndyCar driver, 6'5". And back then, those cars definitely weren't, made for people like that. But he made it work. And he talks about, I forget the year, but I think he said he went over to England to look at the new chassis, and he realized right then he was done with IndyCar racing. But he had a pretty successful sports car career. He was overall winner of 24 Hours of Daytona. Not very many people can say that. He was teammates with Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Dale Earnhardt Sr., and that's something a lot of people definitely can't say either. So definitely, definitely has a lot of cool racing history. And he told a story about being at a bar, and this guy was telling him about being at the same 24 Hours of Daytona race that he won, and the guy had no idea he was talking to the guy that won the race that he was at, which was a really really funny story.
Yeah, it really was. And yeah, he's an engaging guy. Like I say, he's a fun guy, and he just talks a little bit about being from Chicago area, and knowing people in the Bulls organization and all that. So no, it was good. It was a fun talk, and like I said, hopefully we'll talk to him again soon.
Oh, absolutely, we definitely will. But as far as racing news, obviously no IndyCar racing. Next weekend is not next weekend. I got my weekends all confused at this point. Not this weekend, but the next weekend is Mid Ohio. So Mid Ohio Indycar race. Our good friend of the show, Mr. Jagger Jones, which I think will both be at the race. He's going to be racing their USF 2000. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. Hopefully Jacker gets some good results in Mid Ohio.
Yeah, he's looking forward to it from just kind of what he was saying, and yeah, I mean, I know they've tested there before, and he liked the place, and so yeah, hopefully it's a good weekend. It's July 4th weekend, so it'll be a good weekend no matter what happens. And
Absolutely.
And then what else? What F1 ran over the weekend.
Yep.
We had surprise, Max Verstappen wins again. Carlos Sainz was second. Now, a surprise is Hamilton and Mercedes. It look like they've started to get it all figured out. They didn't have the raw speed to run with the top two, but they were fast. And Hamilton looked very happy, and he stood on the podium again. And I think all is starting to be better in Lewis Hamilton's world. I watched the race, but I couldn't tell you he finished much behind that. I think Leclerc was probably fourth, and then I know Alonso was up there at some point and had some power issues, and there was a couple other things that I just don't remember. But yeah, all in all, it was a good race. That Red Bull car, it just got a ton of straightaway speed. The Ferrari had DRS and had the wing open. He just couldn't never run him down in the straightaway. So, it's looking like it's starting to look like it's Red Bull's season to lose at this point. So, and then the trucks were at Knoxville running dirt. And who won that? Gilliland won it. So Gilliland won that, and then SRX was at Five Flags, and the great Helio Castroneves wins that. And I guess he climbed on the fence. I didn't get to see.
And he wasn't even planning on doing that. He wasn't even supposed to be doing that race, right? It was kind of a last minute deal.
That I don't know.
That's what I thought.
I know Kanan was up there quite a bit in that race. One of the local heroes. I just don't remember his name. I think he ran second. So all in all, it looked like a good show. I don't think they tore up a lot of equipment. So maybe Paul Tracy has calmed down a little bit in that series. And what else? I'm not even sure where the Cup cars were this weekend. Were they at Sonoma, or was that last week?
Man, I don't even know. We look bad right now. I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't remember. Obviously, I did not do show notes for the results, but all in that, good weekend of racing. Nice weather in Indianapolis. The heat finally broke. The humidity actually finally broke, and it was a good weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely looking forward to next weekend of racing. Mid Ohio definitely will be a fun time. So next week we were releasing interview with Tristan Vadier. Tristan drove in 2 Indy 500s, I believe. He was someone who, kind of dominated the road to Indy. Had very successful, he kind of came up through the ladder. So he won the Star Mazda Championship, then went to Indy Lights, won the Indy Lights Championship, and then went straight into the Indycar full season with Sam Schmidt Motorsports. Drove the Indy 500 for the 16th his rookie year. And then the second year he drove in the Indy 500s with Dale Coyne Racing, and I believe, and I'm going to say his name wrong, and Scott will correct me, Carlos Huertas.
I think that's pretty good. That's about as good as I could say it.
He qualified for the 500. It was his second 500, and something happened. He had it. I think Wikipedia could be wrong. It says he had an inner ear infection. And Tristan was kind of talking about like he was supposed to be on a plane going to like Europe or something to race something, and he drove. It was really interesting story. He drove from Chicago for a different situation. I forget who the other driver was, but he talks about it. And they're like, yeah, we're going with this person instead. And he was just like, well, I wasted my time. And he was coming off the bus, and someone was outside the bus and said, hey, you may want to go talk to Del Coyne because they're kind of in a situation right now and got to drive in the 500 again because of it. So really cool story. And now he's racing in IMSA with the JDC Miller Motorsports team. So I know they're very competitive. Last year they won 12 Hours of Sebring, and this year they're currently like fourth in the championship, I think. But they've had like 3 podiums. So Tristan's obviously a very good driver, very nice guy. Always been a big fan of him, and it was really cool to talk to him.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. Tristan's somebody. People hear me say this a lot on here. I didn't know a lot about him, but it was a great talk. I really enjoyed, definitely enjoyed talking to him.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely great. And yeah, thanks everyone for really listening, watching on YouTube. If you haven't, make sure you hit like and subscribe. Check us out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And thanks everyone for watching some of the recent videos we did. Like I said, we're trying to kind of branch out a little bit. We did the Jagger Jones IMS video a couple weeks ago, and last week we released the go-karting with Jagger Jones, and that has gotten a lot of views so far. And we've had some comments and stuff, and I saw Fast Times reposted, and it's kind of cool to kind of do on location videos like that and just fun stuff. And we definitely have I know we have some really fun stuff, like some crazy stuff that actually happens planned. It'll be a good time for sure.
Yeah, no, man, stuff, that stuff's really fun to do. I think the next karting one, I won't be able to attend, but there's a couple other videos similar to that, but I know that the next karting one, it's going to be a little different situation, and if the people can make it work, Aaron's going to have a lot of fun recording and doing that one. And yeah, no, it's just stuff's just fun. This is, I mean, that's what it's all about, man. You got to have fun.
Right, absolutely. And I always think of the quote David Land said, where when you do YouTube, you got to create the stuff that you search for and can't find. So that's a lot of
Right.
things I think of, and it's just fun. Like that's something that I've raced against a pro driver in go karts. Like it just sounds stupid. That's why we kind of did a spin off of like Jackass, and I had a Jackass theme music playing. Well, that's what I felt like. I felt like Johnny Knox was saying like when he flipped the dirt bike with Travis Pastrana's dirt bike. He's like my name's Johnny Knoxville and I'm gonna flip this dirt bike.
Well, I'm glad you didn't flip the go kart.
Right, and I think what we were doing was a heck of a lot safer than what Johnny Knoxville was doing.
I think so. Yes.
Jagger gave me, as you will see, he gave me a little tap. I like to call it a little love tap, kind of show me that he was there and just kind of move me out of the way.
Yeah.
He didn't have to do that. He could have just went around me, but nope. Jagger just had to show me. He didn't do it to Jacob. I guess he didn't feel comfortable doing it to Jacob, but he felt comfortable. Well, Jacob's bigger than him, so Jacob could probably. I don't know though. Jagger's like built like a UFC fighter, so I wouldn't mess with Jagger.
Yeah, no, I don't know if he has quite that type of temperament, but yeah, no, it was fun watching you guys, and yeah, he leaned on you a little bit, gave you a little taste of what it's like to get moved out of the way. And
man, I tell you, next time next time we do something like that and you're in attendance, I think I'm gonna wire you up with a wireless mic and have it hooked up to my recorder, because I think there's some stuff there that I think that we can definitely use.
Well, there'll be criticisms.
Oh, I know. I can only imagine.
There'll definitely be
that's the only
criticisms.
thing. That was my only regret was not hooking you up.
No, I didn't have too much to say. I thought it was pretty good. I just talked to your dad most of the time.
Right.
It was we had a good time. We were just laughing, watching.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, no, it was a really good time. And Jagger, we were saying like you could tell he had a good time with it, really good time.
Yeah, he did.
So, maybe we've talked about this, but maybe we can make this kind of like an annual deal. It'd be cool if we get other people involved. And like you said, if we start this, it may get kind of big.
Yeah, I mean, it could definitely be something. We just got to see, just turn. I mean, we tried to turn into something that other people can enjoy, and and maybe we can do something for a good cause. And
Yeah, absolutely. They do stuff like that all the time.
it's all pie in the sky thoughts right now, but eventually maybe we can do something like that.
Hey, all this stuff faults with crazy ideas. There's a lot of times I text you with some really crazy ideas, and some of them work out, some of them don't. But you're the same way. You have ideas too, so it's a good thing.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. Well, what's the old saying is you throw it against the wall, see what sticks, right?
Yeah, it doesn't hurt. Well, I think so next week, Tristan Vaudier, this week, Chris Kneifel, great interview. Please listen because I know you will definitely enjoy. And hope everyone has a great week. And until next time, make sure you hit like and subscribe.
Yeah, thanks everybody, and thanks for all the comments and things like that. We appreciate it, and everybody take care.
Our guest today drove in the 1982 to 1984 kart seasons and drove in the 1983 and 1984 Indianapolis 500s. He did endurance racing, winning the 2001 24 Hours of Daytona. He was also the chief steward for Cart from 2001 to 2004. We were joined by Chris Kneifel. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. I know we've had some tech issues, so thank you so much for working through those with us.
Thanks for the tutorial.
Yeah. Hey, anytime. I'm a 24-hour tech number, so anytime you need tech help. But no, thank you so much for joining us. And so talk a little bit about how you first got interested in racing.
Okay, I guess we all have our own different journeys, but mine's a little bit unique. My first exposure to racing was the 1974 Grand Prix of Monte Carlo. And I had just turned 13 years old, and I got to watch it from the terrace of the Hotel de Paris, and also spent a little bit of time on the terrace of the casino. And so needless to say, I was spoiled, had the silver spoon in my mouth from day one, and certainly a tough act to follow, but it was an unbelievable experience. I was over there with my mom and some family friends, and we got invited to the Grand Prix, and we actually stayed in Italy and just drove in for the couple days that we attended the event. And I was hooked. I had always had an interest in motorsports, but keeping in mind in those days we were limited to what you might see in the Monday morning newspaper or on Wide World of Sports. Occasionally you'd get an IROC race, or of course an occasional Indycar race, but television and motorsports, it was few and far between in those days. And so that really, it took my interest to a different level. And from there, I ended up spending 3 of the next 4 summers in Europe with the family friend that I previously mentioned. And he was real good friends with a guy named Gerhard Schneider from Freiburg, Germany. And Gerhard Schneider would be of the GS tuning. He was one of the BMW teams that ran in the German championship. And people might remember the GS tuning from some of the posters that those of us who are old enough had as kids. And so anyway, we went to a lot of the races in Germany, the touring car races in Germany, and went to a few Grand Prix as well over those years. And that just was, for me, it was hook, line, and sinker. And all well and good to have the experience of being a fan at a young age, but from there it was like, how do I do this? And it's not like I had a family history of anything in terms of being in motorsport. So from there, and I had to basically win. The first thing I won in racing was the disagreement with my mother that would be okay with her to even think about letting me go racing, because her idea for me was something to do with college and a career in something other than motorsports. And so push came to shove. The agreement we made was she supported me to the equivalent of what would be the first year's college education was my first year's racing budget. I had also had the opportunity to attend Bondurant School a couple of times, actually more than a couple, probably several times. And before I started in SCCA racing. But so anyway, that's sort of how I got interested and started. I started in Formula Ford 1600 in 1979 and only spent 2 years in Ford 1600, but it taught me exactly what I needed to get out of it. And, you know, actually I was very fortunate. It was such a competitive class in those days and really got to cut my teeth against guys who I have you know, the absolute most respect for in terms of their driving capabilities and their being racers. Great race car drivers they were in their own right. And, you know, that was just something that was probably as beneficial to me as anything, was having the opportunity to race in such a competitive category as Ford 1600, but also against such really, really talented drivers. And, you know, that was my measuring stick. And I knew that, you know, after a couple of years of, you know, banging my head against the wall with those guys, I had gotten as much as I could out of that, and it was on to the Atlantic Series. So that was sort of my start. It all happened pretty quick and without a plan, but certainly, you know, fortunate to have had the opportunity, and B, of course, no one ever knows if you're going to succeed or have the talent or be any good at it, or for that matter, even like it. And everything basically worked out pretty well for me, at least early on.
So you're 6'6", right?
2 meters on the nose. Yep, 6'6" and some change.
So did that, and it seems like, I mean, you raced everything you wanted to race, but did that ever restrict you at all from anything?
It restricted me in a lot of ways, in terms of it certainly took some opportunities off the table for me that I might have had with a shorter stature. I think it probably, even some people probably didn't consider me for certain rides because of my size and the packaging problems. And you know, not for nothing, engineers weren't particularly fond of me because of the you know, I weigh more. I'm, you know, higher center of gravity. You go right down the list of things that, you know, aren't helping the performance of a race car in terms of my size. So it was always something that you know, it is what it is, and that obviously wasn't going to change. But, you know, like as an example, the 2 years that I drove with Roush Racing in the TransAm series, concurrently, you know, Roush was running GTO with the Ford program with the Mustangs in the, you know, but I never had the opportunity to do even Daytona or Sebring with Roush, simply because of my size. You know, it was a matter of, you know, they were putting, you know, Wally Dallenbach Jr. and John Jones and Greg Pickett or whatever in a car. And, you know, in some cases I'm a foot taller. And, you know, Jack just wasn't, he wasn't going to do anything to help me out on that end, but it just made it prohibitive. So yeah, it certainly kept some doors closed that might have otherwise been open, but it in terms of me physically not being able to fit into a race car, yeah, that also happened, but we managed to work our way through that.
I mean, you talk about, you know, Monaco kind of, you know, being a race you always admired. Did the Indy 500, was that ever like on your radar at all?
Not at all. It was, as a matter of fact, so as I mentioned, I started in the 1600 Ford, so that would have been 79 and 80. 1981 was my first year in the Atlantic Series, which was then sanctioned it was a Canadian series. And so I did that with Douglas Shearson Racing, and Jacques Villeneuve was the lead driver on that team. And also they ran a guy named Tommy Gruna, who was out of the Chicago area. And So I joined on there basically as the third car in 81. Then in 82, Jacques left the team and Alan Berg came aboard, and I stayed on. And I was thinking of, having, I had very high aspirations for the Atlantic Series in 1982. But I guess there's always a but, right? We've heard that so many times. The 82 March for Shearson. Now, keep in mind, in those days, this was the end of the sort of the flat bottom sports car nose Atlantic cars like the RT1s. In the early 80s, the RT4 came out and ultimately became, quickly a superior car. And March came out with a tunnel car, call it just car with side pods, underwings, etc., sliding skirts even in those days. But it was basically what March did was they took their Formula 2 car and put a Atlantic motor in it, and what that meant, or what that means, is the car was overweight. It was very heavy, and because of that, it was slow, and it was seriously it was as bad. I won't say the worst race car I ever drove, but it was as bad a performing race car as I ever sat in. And after a couple of races in that, I'm like, oh, this is, look, now I've been around all of 3 years and not quite a third of a fourth season. And I'm looking at this and I'm like going, this is career suicide. I can't keep doing this. So I told Shearson, I'm done after whatever race. It was about it was sort of middle end of May. I pulled the plug. I'm like, I'm leaving the team. And with that, I left the team, and I had absolutely no plan. I had nothing. I had no clue what the hell I was going to do. And in terms of going back to your question, in terms of IndyCar, Indy 500, up until that point in the middle of May 82, the thought of racing IndyCars literally had never crossed my mind. And to the point where I remember watching at home the Indy 500 1982, and as we all will recall, 82 was a pretty rough year for Indy and IndyCar. It was, we had a couple of guys got lost at Indy, and then the week after at Milwaukee, and I remember thinking to myself, I'm not sure I ever would want to do that. And okay, so now fast forward about 6 weeks. This would be end of June, early July. A guy who I became very good friends with, a Chicago attorney through Formula Ford racing, was very good friends with Lee Koonsman, obviously a great sprint car racer and a very, very good IndyCar driver on the ovals. And so my friend Irwin introduced me to Koonsman, and there was an opportunity to get into an Eagle Cosworth later that season with a very small team out of Indianapolis. And I thought to myself, well, you know what, this might be interesting. So the first thing, of course, there were some licensing issues and whatnot. So we organized a test out at Willow Springs, California, for me to do a rookie driver test for Cart. And of course, that was my first time sitting in an IndyCar. So it was an Eagle Cosworth, Jameson Racing, and there were some quite, even though it was a ragtag fugitive fleet of guys that were working on the car, but it was John Barnes was the chief mechanic. And he obviously went on to some fairly lofty things in his career, and actually he lives not far from me here in the Phoenix area. And so JB was the chief mechanic, and there were a couple of young guys that he had just out of technical school, Joe Kennedy and John O'Gara, whose names might ring some bells, that were also working on that car, and none other than a very young Brian Barnhart. And so it was quite an interesting group. So anyways, long story short, we got a deal put together for a few races later in the year. The car hadn't had any success, really, in terms of getting even qualifying for the races. And we did Riverside. I did Riverside and Road America, and we qualified very well in both. And like they say, a long story short, that's how it started. And then it was really through what became my relationship with Lee Koonsman, and he ultimately was really my mentor. But it was through working with him that we were able to put together a deal to acquire all of the Longhorn assets, which Bobby Hillen was selling at the end of 1982 because he was shutting down his operations. Of course, he had run Al Unser in the previous couple of seasons. And so we organized the thing to get that together. And that's where the Primus started. And 8225 Country Club Place is where the shop was. And that's how I got into IndyCar racing. And it was, like I say, it all happened pretty quick and not necessarily with the plan. But so in 1983, I was pretty much a full-time IndyCar racer. And, in those days, obviously things have changed quite a bit over the years. But so in my first race, August of 82 at Riverside, was also Al Unser Jr.'s first IndyCar race. Bobby Rahal was also a rookie in 82. We had in those days, we had all of those guys coming out of Atlantic Series and Can-Am coming into the Kart Series. And that was really where you saw the big change of sort of even the teams coming in. We're coming out of the Can-Am Series and Atlantics, Shearson, Haas, VDS. You can go right down the list. Anyways, I was at the time, I would have been the fourth youngest driver to race in IndyCar. And of course, that's old by today's standards, being 21 and some change, right? But,
Right.
sorry for the lengthy answer to your question, but
Oh, that's great.
that's how that is how it happened. And it wasn't, I don't have a history of, going to the speedway as a kid and having big dreams of racing in the Indy 500. That wasn't the case. Looking back on it, it's certainly, I count it as a significant, blessing, really. It's an honor to have had the opportunity to race there and to be part of that group. And sometimes, it's like, I don't really think about it too often, but it's easy to think that, I sometimes tell myself, you should have more appreciation for the fact that you had the opportunity to do that, because they're, part of the great history of that racetrack is the, people's passion and literally doing anything and whatever it took to even, get a chance to qualify to race there. And, I wouldn't say it certainly didn't happen easy for me, but it happened sort of unexpectedly. And, I always need to tell myself to really have a great appreciation for the fact that I had the opportunity to qualify and race in the Indy 500 and got to do it twice.
Yeah, it's not that for that time period, that was not so uncommon that guys kind of were able to kind of go, with some experience, go into IndyCar. But it was getting to that time frame where, like you said, the cars were changing and things were becoming very different. So yeah, I mean, I imagine that was a pretty heady experience, even though you were 21, to all of a sudden you're like, well, we're going to IndyCar racing now.
Yeah, no, it's definitely I didn't think, look, I mean, the reality is, the reason that I didn't have a huge interest is it was a lot more dangerous back in those days. And, you know, when you sat, like, I remember the first drivers meeting that I sat in there in 1982, and, you know, you sort of just look around the room, and of the, you know, 26, 28 guys that are sitting there, you know, that wasn't the same 26, 28 that started the year. There'd already been a couple that got lost, you know, that were, you know, died in crashes that season. So when you think about it that way, there was you know, the mortality rate, there was such a thing. And not just you know, fatalities we're talking about. You know, it was pretty likely that if you crashed, you would be hurt. And that was a real deal too. And it was something that it was just part and parcel, you know, it was just part of the deal. And you know, so it was, as a young guy, it was as much a having to basically just be okay with it, you know, and it was good. It never bothered me, but it was something you just had to be aware of. And it's like, okay, we're going to do this and let's go.
You do an oval before Indy? Or was like Phoenix or something on the schedule before?
I did not race an oval before Indy, although we did test. Well, we actually got to test a little bit. You know, I would say a fair bit, but would always like to have done it more. Of course, we're pretty limited because, you know, Mother Nature. We were basically, when the deal came together to when, you know, May starts, you know, the weather's not exactly conducive to running cars at the speedway. But we did get a fall test in, and then a couple days in April, and I'm trying to think. We didn't do anything at Phoenix until after. So no, really, my first oval laps all would have been at the speedway.
How overwhelmed? I mean, how we talked to a lot of drivers who that's like the first time they've ever done oval, and they just talk about like how fast you're going into the first turn and just how narrow the track seems. Like, how overwhelming was that at first?
It's I've heard a few of your podcasts talking to, you know, other guys that have raced at Indy, and I've certainly heard, you know, guys tell the stories and had it described to me even before I experienced it for myself. There isn't really a good explanation. You know, everyone's talking about, you know, you're threading the needle, all the little cliches that you can throw out there, threading the needle, hitting the head of a pin, you're driving into a, you know, just this tiny little hole. It's all true, whatever you want to call it. It's a narrow racetrack, and you're going pretty darn quick, and it takes some getting used to, because you're just not. Look, I mean, with all the Atlantic racing in the world, the fastest that car went top speed was maybe 170 miles an hour. You certainly weren't going through any turns at 170 miles an hour. So now all of a sudden you're going to be turning at 200 miles an hour, you know, and so it's a whole different world. And but you know, the thing is, with the Atlantic training that I had, those cars were ground effect cars, and I had the feel of the car, of what it was like to go through fast turns and having the car stick, and knowing what downforce does to help the car at speed in terms of cornering. And it is a little counterintuitive, in as much the faster you go, the more downforce you make, therefore the faster you can go. Point being, you could be driving a car, you know, and I'll just use the mile per hour that would have been relevant when I was doing it, and this would, you know, go back to like the early 80s. You know, the car might feel quite squirrely at 180 or 185, but it might feel pretty darn good at 195. Now, to have that equate in your brain and connect to your right foot so that you actually believe that, that's really where the challenge was, is to literally, you have to make yourself go faster so the car feels better. Now, like I say, I did have that fundamental understanding and feel of that from the Atlantics. It was just a matter of now, okay, we're going to do this at a much, much higher speed. So I didn't have to really do too much tricking with my brain. But, that's something that you just have to get used to. But, in terms of, driving the car at those speeds through the corners, it all always felt pretty good. Now, I have to tell you that I would not have wanted to have done that without the tutelage of Lee Koonsman. And, because, Lee did a good job of just articulating to me and letting me know what to feel and what was okay to feel and what was not okay to feel. And if you got some of the little senses and cues that you might get that the car might give you that probably were in the not okay category, it was time to come in and talk about it, and let's not learn anything the hard way around there.
Yeah, we've definitely heard that a few times. Guys not trusting what they're feeling, and they wear it. Like you said, learn it the hard way.
Oh, and that is what gets you in trouble there, is thinking that you can drive through it or drive over it, or like carry the car, whatever you want to call it. It just doesn't work there.
So looking at your career, you had roughly 19 starts, and you had, out of that, nearly a third of those were top 10s.
Yep, did pretty good.
That's real good.
Did pretty good. And actually, a couple of those ones that were outside the top 10 should have been, because we're running into the top 10, just had a couple mechanical woes there, but that's okay. It comes with the turf. But yeah, sorry, I interrupted you.
No. Go ahead.
No, but we were competitive. It was look, we were a one car team, but we had a really, really good crew. Wayne Leary was the chief mechanic of the All-American racer Bobby Unser days. And
Wayne Leary can fix anything.
Wayne Leary was
Bobby's old line.
Yep. Oh man, I'll tell you what, some of the best days of my life were spent with Wayne Leary, and that's a whole broadcast unto itself.
You could fill up a whole 3 or 4 hours of racing stories easy with just Wayne Leary.
Easy, but you'd need a few pitchers of beer if you're going to talk about Leary.
Yes,
that's how he rolled. But anyways, but we had a very good team. Of course, being a one car team with an unknown car. So so Longhorn, the 82 Longhorn was not the 83 Primus. Part of it was the tub was the same. The front suspension was the same. The side pods were completely different. The rear of the car from the suspension and whatnot was also different, because you needed, with the tunnel car, because if you remember, the 82 Longhorn didn't really have side pods with underwings or tunnels. It was more of an Eagle sort of style setup there. So the rear suspension was different. So it was probably more than 50% a different race car than what ran in 82. Point being, it's not like we had a notebook of what we could use in terms of setups or anything to go by, because it was, a completely different animal. So with that, it was obviously a steep learning curve, but with the experience that, between Wayne and Lee, we were always pointing ourselves in the right direction. And we did have some very good runs. Look, I mean, we finished, we were third in the Triple Crown that year, which would have been the cumulative results of the Indy, Michigan, and Pocono 500s. And so I thought being third in the Triple Crown was actually a pretty darn good thing. And I think in some cases, I think the car was probably better on the ovals than maybe the road courses. And some of that is, crew experience. But look, I mean, no regrets. Look, my only regret is we didn't get to do it longer, but that's how it goes.
Yeah, no, I certainly understand that. So, and you had I mean, I would call that success. I don't care how you write it down. If you, 30 year starts are in the top 10, that's successful. Where is it a case where you just sponsors dried up and that sort of thing, or kind of what led you out of IndyCar?
When we first started having our chat here, the first thing you said to me was about size. And that was right where my size became prohibitive. Now in 82, the Eagle that I first drove, and then the 83 Longhorn / Primus car, those were aluminum monocoque cars with fiberglass bodywork, or the cowl that came up around the shoulders of the drivers. That was all fiberglass, basically from above your hips in the tub that you sat in. All the bodywork you saw was just fiberglass, and it was easy to accommodate the width of my shoulders, and obviously me sticking up higher out of the car. So making like modifications to bodywork and whatnot, that was simple. You could do that with a hacksaw and bond the thing back together. Now in the beginning in 1984 is when carbon fiber started being used as a component of construction in the cars, and it was typically a piece of a carbon fiber shell that was attached to the top of the aluminum monocoque. And as the carbon fiber became a more integral part of the construction of those IndyCar chassis, to make the carbon fiber strong, it got smaller and smaller and smaller. And even if you look back into in 85 IndyCar, Lola, March, or what have you, they look large compared to what they are now in terms of like the width of the opening at the cockpit and whatnot. But at that point, they'd already become smaller and smaller than what they were in the sort of the previous couple of years with the fiberglass. Anyways, I went to England in the fall of 84 to the March factory to see if I could get into an 85 March. And I'll just put it to you this way. I did not even spend a night in England. I was in and out of there in the same day because I did not fit, and there was no way to modify the carbon fiber to accommodate my size. And at that point, my open wheel racing days were, for all intents and purposes, finished. And so that was like the next one was, okay, I quit the Shearson Atlantic team without a plan. Now I've, my IndyCar driving days were pretty much over in, I knew in August of 84 I was done. And so, that's okay, because as I was always taught, for every adversity, there's a seed for an equivalent or greater benefit. And at that point, it was a matter of figuring out, well, what's next? And lo and behold, the TransAm series was starting to really do some really good things in North America. The manufacturer involvement from both Ford and Chevrolet was increasing, and had been for a few years, but it started to really, sort of get up to that Ford versus Chevy rivalry, or even some might call it Ford versus Chevy war. And I had the opportunity to go and meet with Ford Motorsport and with Jack Roush and Charlie Seelitz and Roush Protofab Racing at the time. And wouldn't you know it, I got myself a deal to become a factory driver for Ford Motorsport, and was put onto the Roush Protofab TransAm team, teaming with Willie T. Ribbs and Wally Dallenbach Jr. So that's how I pivoted from IndyCar to sports car racing.
That's a pretty good pivot, because those were good days. Those were good days in Trans Am racing right there.
No, it was great, and not for nothing, I got a raise.
Oh, well, there you go.
Right?
That always helps.
Yeah, it's not all bad.
One thing I wanted to ask, and kind of going back just for a second, about the Indy 500. So as you alluded to, obviously you were familiar and you kind of experienced Monaco. and you weren't too familiar with Indy 500. I just wanted to ask you, like, so your first Indy 500, like on race day, like what was your overall impression of it? Like what?
Oh shit! It was mind blowing.
Yeah.
It was. I remember. I remember sitting in the garage, just not in the driver's seat or anything, but I remember just sitting in the garage, um, just looking for some quiet time and just kind of hanging out there. And it was like, okay, well, I want to go out and sort of feel and experience what this thing's all about. I mean, you could sense even sitting in a garage where there's only maybe 20 people mulling around, you still you can feel the magnitude of what's happening sort of outside of Gasoline Alley. And Kunzman's like, no, you probably shouldn't go out there, because it's like, he knows, and it's like it gets overwhelming or even intimidating because you can't imagine the size and scope of all those people. But I'm like, going, okay, now I'm going to do this. So I went out there sort of when the cars got taken out, and of course there were no driver. The driver introduction in those days, I think, was over the PA system after some of the pomp and circumstance that was going on. They sort of did over the PA system. They did a grid introduction. There wasn't any formal or fancy driver intro thing. So I wandered out there and was looking around, and it's like, holy crap, there's a lot of people here. And it's like, now it's like, I see what everyone's been talking about. This is a big deal. And I've got literally like over 40 minutes before, I have to get in the car. I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do now? It's like, so I literally just laid down on the wall, separating the pit lane and the racetrack. I just laid down. I took a little sort of shop rag, put it over my eyes, and just sort of chilled out for a little bit. Sort of just minded my own business, because I felt that if get into the small talk routine and everything, just played too much mind games and too much pressure. So I just sort of punched out, took a little bit of time to myself, and from that it was a matter of get strapped into the car and then go about your business. But it was awesome, and I'm glad that I went out there early so that I could just take a few minutes to soak it all in and to realize like, yeah, this is a big deal. And then, but like I say, then I'm like, okay, now what do I do? And it was one of those things that you're not going to walk 10 minutes back so you can walk 10 minutes back. So I just sort of, found a little quiet time and chilled out. But yeah, it was pretty good. Look, it was, whatever stories you've heard, it was not understated.
Have you have you been back to Indy at all since you've ran there?
For the race, the only two Indy 500s I've ever
Were the ones you raced in?
on TV have been from sitting in a race car.
Wow.
All right. I've had pretty good seats both times.
Yeah.
So you didn't even come back for the 100th, huh?
No, I did watch it on TV though.
Right.
Didn't Rossi win that?
Yes.
I'm sorry?
Rossi won it. Yeah.
It was Rossi, yes. Yeah.
Is it one of those things that once you were done, you were done? I mean, I realized that later you became chief steward at car, but like as far as like wanting to be around the activity, unless you had a role, was it kind of one of those things that, hey, I've been there, I've done it. Unless I have a reason to be there, I don't want to be there. That's
pretty darn accurate. And I can, sort of go back to, I remember like, I was in my 20s. So this would have been sort of like in the early mid 80s. Of course, you're in the sport, you cross paths with people that are in all different sort of phases of their careers and their lives. And you see through a lot of people, you see what you would aspire to become, and you also see what you don't want to become. And And through that, it was a couple things always stood out to me. And like I said before, I never had a problem sitting in the car and, taking the risk. That was fine. And as long as I was doing it for the right reason, I had absolutely no problem with it. And the second that it stopped being the right reason, that's when it's stupid. And where I'm going with that is I told myself that I would never be a race car driver for the sake of being a race car driver. And what I mean by that is if the only thing that it's good for is boosting your ego, or like you sitting on an airplane talking to someone, well, what do you do? I drive race cars. Ooh, okay, cool. If that's your reason for doing it, that's not a good enough reason. And because at that point the risk isn't worth it. You're a moron for doing that. And the other thing was, in terms of like the driving, was I only wanted to do it to be at the absolute best of my abilities, and with quality people, good experiences, good times. I loved both the on and the off the track, the social components, everything. It was all equally important to me. But again, much like I'm not going to do it for the sake of doing it. The same thing was on the how long do you want to do this for kind of thing. The second that it was time to move on, it was like it's done and it's over. And I just never wanted to, it's not that I don't love the sport. I love the sport. I consume a fair bit of it on television. But I don't really, I feel that I was able to give plenty, and I never really felt like, I just didn't want to be the one sitting there in the hospitality tent, like staring and like, okay, waiting to small talk with somebody about something that happened 30 years ago, kind of like what we're doing now. But it was, it's not my cup of tea. So I'd rather find other things to do, if that makes any sense to you.
You ever see the movie Everybody's All American? About, I forget who the actor was that played it, but he was a all-star football player in high school, college, played in the pros, and then he retires, and then this is set back in the period of the 60s, early 70s, and he retires, and then he takes jobs based off his racing career, or excuse me, his football career, sorry. And he would become a spokesman for AstroTurf, and he'd become a spokesman for this, but the whole thing was he had to stand there and tell his old football stories.
Right.
And at one point during the thing, he tells his wife, he goes, I don't even know if my stories are real or not anymore. He said, he goes, I don't even know if I really did those things anymore.
Right.
And I thought it was kind of whoever wrote that, I thought had a keen insight into what it can become if you're not careful.
No, I'm with you. Thankfully I didn't fall into that trap, but I think that there's probably a lot of truth to it. I mean, it's like I said, I saw early on a lot of things. And when I say things, I'm probably speaking more specifically about people. I saw what I did not want to, just didn't want to be that guy. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying that's not it wasn't for me. And I mean, I know you guys got other questions, but I'll give you a story from not long ago, like within the last. It would be pre-COVID, so probably 3 years ago. So it wasn't that long ago, but it was not terribly recent. Sitting at a little bar not far from my house, and we were watching. There was a NASCAR race on, and it wasn't super busy. So I'm just sort of sitting there minding my own business, and there's a guy comes and sits down a couple seats down to the left of me, and he's watching the NASCAR. I'm pretty sure it was Daytona 500, And this guy starts talking. He goes, wow, Daytona, that's such an awesome racetrack. And he starts telling me a story about he'd been to Daytona. And then he goes, yeah, I was there when the Corvettes won at Daytona.
Here we go.
He goes, I remember. He goes, it was 2001. It was right before Earnhardt was killed. And he starts telling me the story of the Rolex 24 Daytona from 2001. And I'm just sitting there listening. And now at this point, this is going on for more than probably 20, 30 minutes. Some other people that I know have come down and now sat down to the right of me, and they're actually can hear what this guy's talking about. I'm literally not talking, just listening. And this guy told me about the full experience of the weekend and gave me almost an hour by hour breakdown of the race, including weather reports. And then the guy finishes, pays his check, and leaves. And my friends are like going, why didn't you say anything? I'm like, no, I was enjoying listening to the guy. And they're like going, yeah, but you should have told him. I'm like, not for nothing. The guy's telling a pretty damn accurate story. I'm like, that's actually kind of how I remember it, but they're like, oh, you should have told him. And I'm like, I didn't really feel like having that conversation, but it was pretty funny.
Were you concerned that you weren't going to win that one?
Yeah. What you
meaning in his story? Meaning in his story.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
You were hanging on. You're like, man, I hope I win this one.
I was like, I hope it works out good. Yeah.
So how did you become we touched on it a while ago. How did you become the chief steward at Carton? I mean, if you're not really spending a lot of time around the racing, how did that come about?
Well, I was under contract driving for Corvette Racing. As a matter of fact, I had just re-signed with the team. And this is something that had been going back. Okay, there's always history and everything. So I met Wally Dallenbach in 1982 when I did my rookie licensing test at Willow Springs, which I had mentioned. So that's when I first met Wally. So that would have been in July, August of 82. And then of course he was the chief steward of Carton when I first began. So that's where I would have ultimately began to know him. And then of course, was teammates with Wally Jr. for the 1 year there when he was with us at Roush. And I actually drove with Paul Dallenbach. Paul and I shared a car a couple of times. As a matter of fact, we won an IMSA race together at Road America in 87 in a Protofab Camaro. Anyways, had a pretty long history of relationships, and good, positive, with the Dallenbach family. And I knew for quite some time, going into the sort of late 90s, and I say late 90s, like starting in maybe 97-ish, I knew that Wally was looking to, sort of retire at some point. Not necessarily imminent, but he was contemplating. And I had gone to a couple of kart races and talked with Wally and some of the other powers to be, but there was a lot of things happening in the upper echelons of kart management in those days. I mean, you can remember there was a 1 year they had three presidents or chairmen in the course of 1 year. It was so that just never really happened anyway. So now jump to 2001, literally like the week after I was part of the winning team with Corvette Racing from winning the Rolex 24 at Daytona. I'm at home, literally probably about 100 feet from where I'm sitting right now. And a phone call comes in, no cell phones in those days. Phone call comes in. Hey, Chris, Wally Dallenbach's on the phone for you. I'm like, oh, cool, that's nice. I'm thinking to myself, that's cool. Wally's calling to congratulate me on winning Daytona. That's what I'm thinking, right? So I get on the phone. Hey, Wally, what's going on? He goes, well, are you ready? I'm like, what? Ready for what? He goes, when can you be in Detroit? I'm like, okay. I'm like, what's going on? He goes, it's your time. I'm like, oh boy. I'm like, okay. So I think it was like, I was like within 48 hours, I was in Detroit, in Troy, Michigan, at the Carton offices, and so this was now mid-February of 2001, and literally, 3 weeks later, I was at my first race as chief steward. I did one more race with Corvette Racing, 12 hours of Sebring, and finished third there. So my last two races as a professional driver, I was one Daytona 24-hour and finished third at Sebring, so that's pretty good.
Oh, absolutely.
And but anyway, so that's how that happened, and it once again sort of a pattern through my career. Getting out of Atlantics, and then who knew, into Indy cars, and then didn't fit in the '85 Indy car. Who knew, factory Ford driver in the TransAm series. And then blah, blah, blah. Here we go, 15, however many years later. Wally calls. Who knew? I'm now the chief steward of Carton. It's like, like you literally can't, you can't plan it. And none of it was planned. But that thing happened because Wally knew me, and his family knew me for a long time. And, and not for nothing, Wally was smart. He got out at the right time. He tossed me the hot potato.
What's that like, just on a race day, and or a race weekend, I should say, and you're the chief steward, which means pretty much everything is coming down on you. You're responsible for all on track activity, and I'm sure a little bit off track as well.
Yeah, no, as it's written in the rule book now, of course, there's an alternate reality to the rule book, and there always is. There's like a parallel universe of realities in terms of who's really in control. But yeah, in terms of the chief steward or race director is the number one official, in charge and responsible for everything that happens at the event, and it's all encompassing. That's certainly not an exaggeration. So yeah, there's a huge amount of responsibility that that goes along with that. So what's it like? Well, I'm not sure there's, when you're going through it, I'm not sure there's too many good days. The bad ones are just long. They're bad. They're hard. It's looking back on it. It was one of those things. This is literally a couple chapters in a book, which I one of these days need to get myself motivated enough to spend some quality time on and do that. But it's difficult, but it's as difficult as it is, and as thankless as it is, it's equally rewarding. And the reward, that's something that it's a feeling you get from within. Not necessarily equivalent to the sense of accomplishment, that you get from, that you feel like after you won a race. I remember, after winning the TransAm race at Watkins Glen in '90, beating Tommy Kendall and Ron Fellows, and that's just a great picture of a podium. It's one of my favorites in terms of looking back. But it's like, I stood on the top step of the podium, and the guys next to me are both Hall of Famers. And so on that, I'm not a Hall of Famer, and but on that day I beat two Hall of Famers. That's a sense of accomplishment that is felt, and it's one it's felt and not forgotten. Being chief steward, race director of Carton, the sense of accomplishment is equally as rewarding as what it feels like to win a race or to have success on the track. but it's so very different. It's literally more exhausting. It's just
Okay.
mentally grueling and draining, and certainly not for everybody. But I can tell you that it was the hardest thing that I ever did in my life. But it was also by far the steepest learning curve. I literally had no idea what I was walking into, and part of that is you can't predict the uncertainty of what happened, particularly in 2001, where it seemed, seemingly like, everyone's heard the thing, well, that happens once in every 10 years, or that might happen once in every 20 years, or wow, that's never happened ever in the history. We were getting that damn near every week, and it was hard for me to wrap my head around exactly like, wow, is this really how this is like all the time? Like, are you kidding me? So it was hard at best. I mean, it was really, really difficult. But I like I say, steep learning curve, but I got through it, and I was able to learn enough to figure out what needed to happen to make it better and make it go forward, and to really build the race control model of the future. And like I said, we don't have enough time to really, to go through what actually happened, but I can tell you, it took a couple years of doing, but I was able to do it. And to this day, the race control units that are operated in both IMSA and Indycar are basically the model that I developed, and largely people that I brought in are running those shows, and many of the people that were on the staff are still active. Of course, as time goes on, some people have retired, and the new guys have brought in their own people. But basically, that's something that I'm immensely proud of, is the fact that something that I envisioned and was able to basically begin to create is sustainable, and that was ultimately was my goal, was to see this thing through, so that the future was going to be set and stable and in good hands, because that's what Wally gave it to me, wanting to make sure that it was in good hands. And I was in the situation that it wasn't going to be, for a lot of reasons. And I quickly understood that this wasn't going to be something that I was going to be doing for the next 10 years or 15 years. It became clear to me that, this was going to happen. And a lot of times when you go in and have to do changes like I was doing, a lot of times you're not the one that ultimately survives. And it wasn't, like I say, I didn't go there with thinking, I'm going to do whatever I can so that I can keep the job. I'm going to make sure this thing is built properly and is left in the right hands, so that it can be sustainable and successful for the next generation. And that's happened. And to the point where guys that that came, you hear the coaching trees in other sports, guys that I worked with and worked for me are now the race directors in both IMSA and Indycar, and have been for quite a while. And a lot of the people that work in those race control rooms came from our staff in Champ Car and Carton.
Yeah, that's got to be something to be proud of. It's so hard to build, I'm sure, a team like that, and just make all the pieces work. Especially, I can't even imagine trying to do it within the confines of CART at that time, because I imagine that was a little bit of the Wild West in many ways. as that everything was just kind of going the way it was going.
It was Armageddon every week.
Right.
Hard to explain, really, but it was crazy. Yeah.
Oh, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Did on a little bit lighter topic, I remember you used to have like the Bulls on your
Yeah.
Indycar.
Yeah, man.
Were you I mean, did you have a financial relationship with them, or is it just because you're from Chicago? And
No, it was okay. Yeah, obviously, yes, I was from Chicago. Big in those days, Bulls fan. These days, and for actually the last 25 or so years, Phoenix Suns fan. Actually, I've always been proud to be a Suns fan, but their Suns are actually very, very good. But anyway, back to your question. Yeah, I actually had I knew a couple of the guys that were partners in the Bulls in those days, but I was also good friends with the guy by the name of Rod Thorne, who was the general manager of the Chicago Bulls, the guy that drafted Michael Jordan. And I knew a bunch of the players on the team, guys that I was just good friends with them. And I actually played a lot of side basketball just for staying in shape kind of stuff. Played a lot of hoops with some of the guys that were on the Bulls, and they were friends, and we sort of just did that. It's just a fun thing. And actually, Rod Thorne and his wife Peggy were guests of ours at my rookie race at the Indy, the 1983 500. Yeah. So Rod took some time off. I guess the Bulls must not have been too far in the playoffs that year. It was before Jordan, so
right.
So Rod was able to come to Indy for a couple of days. It was pretty cool having him there. But
yeah, they had some lean years before Jordan got there. But
yeah, it was pretty lean. Tickets were cheap though.
Right.
I'm sure.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that was pretty cool. Actually, the funniest thing, we're talking about Wayne Leary earlier, and I mean, just the grizzly old Leary. Now, it's like anyone that knew Leary from those days. If he didn't have a Simpson jacket on, it could be 100 degrees out. He'd have a Simpson jacket on.
Yes.
And we got from the Bulls. They gave us a bunch of these sort of, I guess they were tailored similar to, I guess what like Letterman jacket, like high school Letterman jackets sort of looked like. But they were like this shiny. I don't even know what material it was. I don't think anything could stick to it. Any liquid, it would just bead off. But it was like these red sort of jackets that had a Bulls logo on the chest. And Leary got, and they bought them for all the team guys. And Leary literally wouldn't take this thing off. He would literally be wearing a Bulls jacket. We did the Michigan 500 in July, and it's like 93 degrees, 120% humidity. And there's Leary with his Bulls jacket. Leary wouldn't have known a basketball if it landed on his head. It was classic. It was pretty funny.
He is. To say that I was friends with him would be an absolute lie, but I spent a little time around him, especially in the years when he and Simpson hung out over there, that bar, McGillivray's or whatever it was called. And then when Wayne worked for Simpson, I got a story. My brother ran Silver Crown cars and midgets. Wayne helped him get some helmets and had it all painted and everything. And at Phoenix was opening race of the year. Going through the dog leg, somebody had lost a muffler and it was laying in the track. And somebody kicked it up and it come back and it flat sided on my brother's helmet.
Damn.
Heavy stainless muffler. And it broke the helmet, destroyed the helmet. And I mean, these were like the opening hot laps. it was like the first laps he'd run. And, Wayne saw that and he said, he brought him down the helmet. Asked if he's okay. He said, "Here's a helmet," and he said, "I'm going to get you one painted up." Right. And that was the kind of guy Wayne Leary was. He might have been gruff. He might have been whatever. Absolute gem of a human being.
Yeah, like I say, one of the best people I've ever known.
Yeah.
Just don't piss him off.
Right. No, this is true. Good guy though. I mean, I really, really liked the little bit of time I was around him.
No, like I say, it's him and Koonsman, were the two of the most gigantic blessings that I ever received in my life, was being able to have them, take care of me. And, look, and ultimately become friends, and,
Right.
and literally have a true love for both of them, which I do. It's just like, that's more important than anything happening on a racetrack. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I always tell people, I said, at the end of the day, like I said, we had midgets, and my dad worked on Indy cars and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, you're really left with the relationships and the stories, and everything else kind of goes away. Trophies get dirty. I mean, they get dusty just sitting there, and they, if they're silver, you got to polish them all the time. But the stories are always right there at the tip of your tongue, and that's the good times for me outweigh a lot of that other stuff.
Well said. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, I concur. What's next? Keep it coming.
Well, I only have one other question I wanted to ask about. So obviously 2001, you win 24 Hours of Daytona. And so I'm guessing there was a lot of attention that year just because of who your teammates were, not in the other Corvette car.
Right.
I'm guessing that probably, I don't know, I'm guessing there's probably, and maybe there wasn't as much attention on you because I'm sure most of the attention was probably on the other car, right?
100%. You have to back up a little bit here. So that was our third year at the Rolex 24 with Corvette Racing. The first year, and I'm just going to speak specifically to the car that I was in. So the first year, it was myself, Ron Fellows, John Paul Jr. And then the second year, it was myself, Ron Fellows, Justin Bell. And then the third year was myself, Ron, Johnny O'Connell. And then we picked up as a fourth driver. Frank Freon came over from our sister car because of the insertion of the Earnhardts, plural, with Andy Pilgrim and Kelly Collins. So anyways, going back to our second year, which would be 2000, we literally finished second overall by less than 30 seconds to our arch rival, the Olivier Beretta, Carl Wendlinger, and Dominic Dupuy Orica Viper. And they beat us by, I don't remember the exact, but it was just less than 30 seconds. But in the first couple hours of the race, we had a fueling problem where we weren't able to basically get fuel into our car other than just a very limited amount, which obviously cost us time in the pits. So we had to make extra pit stops, and we were several laps down literally by the end of a couple hours. And we pulled it all back short of 30 seconds. And I remember sitting at dinner with Ron. We were at, what was that place called? We were at this little Italian restaurant. The chain deal starts with a B. I don't remember. We were having dinner the night after the race.
Beppo?
What's it called?
Buca de Beppo, is that it?
No, it wasn't Buca de Beppo. I don't know. Remember? I should know. I'm not as dim-witted as frickin' Halsmer, like not remembering stuff. But so I know you guys interviewed him, and old Pete always forgetting something. But anyways, but he is an engineer, so the absent-minded thing sort of makes sense. But
right.
But literally, like, me and Ron were sitting there, and we're like just staring at each other, and we're like, "Oh, fuck, we were so fucking close." And we're like, "Okay," and we're like, "We know how to win this race. We can win this race." And so we went back after and had some good sit downs with the Corvette Racing guys, with Gary Pratt and all of the people at Corvette Racing. and we're like, we can do this. And it was literally something that was pretty darn close to consuming not just me and Ron, but everyone in the Corvette racing team. We had our eye on that ball for basically a year. And everything that we did was basically with going there to execute perfectly and winning that race. And so we had to, I guess maybe we had to come close and not succeed a couple of times. And we were third in 99 in our class, second in class, second overall in 2000, and first overall in 2001. So we went 3-2-1 technically in the 3 times that we did it together. But you know, it was you know, it was an interesting thing. So now to your question, sorry, I sort of took a little random road trip.
Perfect.
The fact that the Earnhardts were there was it was not a distraction to us. It could have been anyone, because we literally we didn't care. It was actually probably something that was good for us, because it allowed us to just put our noses down and do our thing, and literally no one paid any attention to us, as you might imagine. And as you mentioned, there were two heroes, 2 mega superstars in our sister car, and it was a big deal. It was a big deal for Corvette racing. It was a big deal for all of the people on our team. It was a big deal for both Dale and Dale Jr., because this was something that they had wanted to do for a long time, and they put a lot of time and effort, and even, you know, blood, sweat, and tears into making that happen. You know, putting in the testing time. We did a lot of days at Sebring testing with those guys, and you know, and like I say, they took it very seriously, and they came to play. You know, they were there racing, and those are 2 of the best that ever sat in a race car, in my opinion. But it didn't matter to us. Like I said, it might have even been a good thing for us that the attention was just focused on them, and we just sort of did our thing. But we set out the whole year before, and that was before we knew the Earnhardts were going to be, you know, in our sister car, of course. But you know, we weren't going to be denied in that case, because we'd come so close before. So it really didn't affect us that they were there, and not for nothing. We were faster than they were on the track. So even from a competition standpoint, they weren't going to beat us. They weren't our competition, even though they were in the same car. They weren't going to beat us. So they weren't even, you know, it's not like we had a threat. And, you know, like, not for nothing, you know, it might have been, and I'm not even going to say it. I don't think the statute of limitations is up on that yet, but you know, we took care of our business, and it was all good.
Yeah, I just think that I think there's teams, especially situations like that, where teams can get locked in, drivers get locked in, and like you said, you're so focused. I mean, the sky could be on fire, and you don't care. It's just you have this main goal, and it's to achieve the win. And to me, that's when motorsports is probably at its best for the competitor, and by competitor, I mean for the teams as well.
Yeah.
You know, I got to tell you, man, this has been a great interview. Thank you so much for doing it. Apologize for the technical issues before we got started.
No, thanks for the question.
Man, it's been so enjoyable, and thank you so much.
Well, I'm like the Energizer Bunny. All you got to do is wind me up, and I'll just motor on. But you know, it's look, I'm honored. It's been nice having the opportunity to spend some time with you guys and your audience and your listeners, and you know, hopefully we can have the opportunity to visit again.
Absolutely.
You know, I'd love to, and you know, not for nothing, it's yeah, obviously we're just sort of getting to know each other. There's a lot more. I can talk a lot more than about me. And in some cases I'm more comfortable talking about other things than me as well. So in terms of, if you ever want to reach out and, like I say, I've my background, well, obviously, as you know, between, having been, chief steward, race director, and all of the stuff there and the racing, I'm diverse enough. I'm probably more diverse than most in terms of, the motorsports universe. And, I'm happy to visit with you guys on any number of topics. It doesn't necessarily have to be, the history of CSK. As much as I appreciate the waltz down memory lane, I've got pictures all around the house that remind me, and thankfully they're good memories, like you guys touched on. It's nice to look around and be reminded of the wonderful people and relationships that have managed to accumulate over the course of a career and a lifetime. It's awesome, and it's great to actually add you guys to the list. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, we're absolutely going to take you up on that.
Absolutely
take you up on that.
Sweet.
But it really means a lot to have you on, and it really means a lot that you've actually watched some of our episodes. So
absolutely,
I really appreciate that. That's really cool.
Yeah, no, I enjoy you guys. Like I say, I need to do more, but I sort of picked some of the people that I know actually well.
Mm-hmm.
Because I like to listen to, see how full of shit they are. But the Halsmer one was the most recent that I listened to, and I was just like laughing. I'm like going, fucking Halsmer. Like I've got so many Halsmer, because Pete and I, we raced against each other a little bit in Indycars. You there?
Yeah, we're here.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But we raced a little bit in Indycars, but he broke his leg in Indy and missed a few races. So we sort of were. I've actually got a picture of me passing him at Michigan 500 in '83. But we were teammates at Roush in '86 with the XR4 Ti with the Mercours. So that was my second year, and last year at Roush when Halsmer was there his first year. So like I say, I was teammates with Pete for a whole year at Roush. And I mean, there was one, so like we were in a huge manufacturer deal battle with Chevrolet. So it was Wally Dallenbach Jr. and Greg Pickett and Jim Miller, whoever else was a Chevrolet. Willie T was in a Camaro. And it was me and Halsmer. Scott Pruitt did some bunch of races with us. And Klaus Ludwig came over and did probably a third, maybe a little bit more than a third, but he did a bunch of races with us as well. And so all of our, like Pruitt, Halsmer, and me, all of our cars were painted the same with Motorcraft Mac Tools livery.
Right.
And Klaus's car, for some reason it got painted black one time. I don't know why, but this was at one of the Florida races. It was either Tamiami Park or St. Pete. And we're in all these cars. There's like five cars sort of under one, transporter tent. So everything's pretty wedged in there. And remember, Halsmer literally says to me, "Whose car is that?" And he's pointing at Klaus's car. And I looked at Pete and I said that Doug Feehan was the Mac Tools rep in those days, who famously is the Corvette Racing, team boss, program director for Corvette Racing. I could tell you stories about Feehan. We didn't even touch on that. It's a whole nother deal in terms of the Doug Feehan legacy and how he started in racing and came to where his, program director of the great Corvette Racing that just retired from. Anyways, I looked at Feehan and I said, "You fucking believe this guy? Hallsberg was curious. He's like, whose car is that? I said, Pete, it's Klaus. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah, it's Klaus Ludwig. He's like, when did he start driving for us? I'm looked at Pete and I'm like going, he's literally been here. He's been in the United States for like the last 2.5 months doing all these races with us. I don't know what to tell you, Pete. Yeah, but that's
hilarious.
But that's Hallsberg. Like he said in this thing, he's an engineer. He absent-minded. It's just funny, hysterical. Oh my God,
that's funny.
But anyways, now I enjoyed. You know what you should do is just send me a list of some of the guys that you think I might know, and I'll cue you up on some of the shit they ask them.
We'll definitely do that.
Hey, we can even do.
Sure.
Hey, sometime we can even do a Chris Kneifel and Pete Hallsberg episode. I'm sure he'd be up for that.
Oh my God, yeah, Pete. You know what? I tell you what. He is seriously one of the really, really nicest guys.
Oh, great guy.
Oh, yeah.
Love Pete.
Just super nice guy, and not for nothing, he was probably an underrated racer. Really a very good race car driver. And but he was, obviously got a late start, and that didn't do him any favors.
Right.
He got old faster than the rest of us because he started later.
Oh man, that's funny.
It's all good. Now you guys are awesome. Much appreciated.
Yep. No, it really means a lot.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.